The South African Parliament Portfolio Committee on International Relations and Corporations and the South African Liaison Office, SALO, earlier this week hosted a colloquium on the people's expectations for South Africa's G20 presidency. And this is a conversation with non-state actors. What we've been doing and what we've been hearing a lot is from government. We've been hearing from a lot of official bodies. But what do various citizens have to say? What do NGOs, for example, and civil society groups and their expectations of the G20? All of this will be focused on this afternoon as we host our weekly G20 feature with myself, Thami Ngubeni, here on Africa in Business and the National Pulse on SAFM with Ashraf Garda. So that's our focus for today. What are the people on the ground saying? What are their expectations? Are they even aware of the G20 presidency and the key issues that are being discussed? We'll be looking at this afternoon. It's titled A Conversation with Non-State Actors, and through this colloquium, the committee, as well as SALO, seek to establish stakeholder expectations regarding South Africa's G20 presidency with various engagement groups. Let me repeat those once again for your benefit if you've just joined us. It's the Y20, the C20, the W20, the T20, as well as the B20, amongst others.
In fact, there was a M20 yesterday or 2 days ago that we attended because we broadcasted from there. I'm not sure how many 20s there are into the all-important G20, right? But I mean, the point is well taken. So building on that discussion of the various G20 engagement groups that has been highlighted, right? One of the key issues has been the issues of implementation that goes beyond the G20 meetings in November. I think it's a big issue. So what happens after that? And there are many people who are particularly concerned about the overall relevance to the people in the street. That means, how does it impact all of them? So, to discuss it even further, we're now joined on the line by the Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on International Relations and Cooperation. That's Supra Mahumapelo. With me, Thami, you can take over.
Thank you so much. A very good afternoon to you, Mr. Mahumapelo. Good to have you with us on Africa in Business as well as SAFM as we continue focusing on the G20. But this is a very important aspect, finding out what the non-state stakeholders are expecting from the upcoming G20. But in what ways is your committee actively working to champion the voices of all the stakeholders that you've engaged? And also, while you're doing that, making sure that their perspectives and their voices are also heard and that they do actually shape the G20 deliberations. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Thami, and good afternoon to you also, Ashraf, and those who are listening and watching. Thank you very much and good afternoon.
So let's find out, Mr. Mahumapelo.
In fact, I can jump in now, Thami. Certainly, we can do that. So let's get to this issue. In terms of, so we know there's been an issue from the outside of people not too sure exactly where it goes, right? But perhaps you may want to pick up, Thami, on that issue of just the stakeholder engagements and what happens. So I'll leave it to you, in fact, do that.
No, certainly. I mean, it's such a key thing, ensuring that all the voices are represented. And Mr. Mahumapelo, I'm wondering how you, as the committee, are going to ensure that you are actively championing the voices of all the stakeholders involved, that from the highest office to the officeless, those voices are heard, and that their perspective also shape the deliberations surrounding the G20. What is it that your committee is doing in that regard?
Once more, thank you very much, Sister Thami. Firstly, the Portfolio Committee is not a non-state actor. We are a creature established in terms of the Constitution of the Republic, and we exist basically in the context of the Parliament of the Republic of South Africa to do three things. One, to do oversight on the executive. Two, to make laws. And three, to make sure that we represent the people. So that's the framework within which all committees of Parliament operate. So we came together as the Portfolio Committee and we deemed it necessary because we do oversight on the Department of International Relations and Cooperation to bring them together. But in this case, we brought in a non-state actor who was working with us, SALO, to make sure that we look at other non-state actors the extent to which they are playing a role in this matter of the G20, which is going to happen here in South Africa in November. So we met with the T20, which is the think tanks, the C20, the B20, the L20, W20 for women, and the Y20. In summary, our observation is that the Republic of South Africa, under the presidency of Ntate Ramaphosa, but also representing the African continent, because the African Union is working together with South Africa to make sure that South Africa is just a venue which is hosting the G20. It becomes successful. So we are happy, one, that logistically, content-wise, research, everything else so far is going well. Secondly, we are happy that from the side of Parliament, led by the Speaker, Togo Didiza, at the end of this month, they are going to be having their own P20, which is parliamentarians coming together to then look at, from an oversight perspective, what is it that parliaments are expecting because they represent the people. Critically, what was emphasized yesterday is the fact that other G20s have been sitting, but there hasn't been institutionalized, systematic, sustainable mechanisms put in place to make sure that decisions that are made at this G20 summits are indeed followed on after the G20 summit. In this regard, we've agreed with the non-state actors yesterday that using avenues like our parliament, we will make sure that every 6 months after the G20, we will demand that government table a report in parliament, and the report must also be given to the people of South Africa so that they can express their own views. Secondly, those 6 months report must be tabled with the African Union so that the African Union can make sure that member states within the African continent do attend to the agreements that are emerging from the G20. Thirdly, Pan-Africanist Parliament, we've agreed that in their sittings, no sitting must sit without looking at the way forward in as far as progress coming out of the G20 is concerned. But we also agreed with the proposal made by the Y20 young people that these structures, some of them are going to cease to exist after November. The young people are suggesting that no, these structures must not cease to exist like the Y20. There must be a G20 Youth Council, which will exist globally to look at matters that are affecting young people in South Africa, in Africa, and all over the world. So we hope that those structures can live beyond the G20 as a new phenomenon and a new approach going forward.
Okay. One of the things, Supra, and I want to pick your brain on this one, is you judge the conversations that take place in WhatsApp groups. What are the biggest issues that they're concerned about every single day? I mean, the issues of crime, as we know, is one, and no jobs. I'll tell you what, nobody in 3 family groups that I'm involved in have even mentioned the G20 once in the last 5 months. Now, if we then extend that to other conversations from other families, it does suggest a very, very urgent need to bring in civil society into the conversation so that they fully understand the impact of G20 and how it will help them, and therefore they will embrace it fuller. What's your plan to do just that?
Remember, we don't implement G20. We do oversight on the executive that is responsible for the G20. You are right. And the people who are talking on the social media are right. That is not everybody. The majority of the people don't know and don't have an association with the proceedings, the contents, and expected outcome of the G20. So yesterday, one of the emphasis that was made was that these structures, which are said to be representing the people like the C20, the B20, and so on, must make sure that from next week, they intensify more than ever before communication with the people on the ground across the African continent. But we also hope that member states of the African Union, parliamentarians who are part of the Pan-African Parliament, and all the NGOs and community-based organizations can make sure that they raise awareness and sensitize our people about this important platform, but also to educate them that G20 is a product of a crisis financially which was facing the world in 1997, 1998, and the ministers of finance came together to come up with a solution. And in the course of that, that's how then this creature called the G20 came into existence. And 10 years later, the same crisis arose. And that's why then the heads of states came into the picture. And that's where we find ourselves now. If we don't educate our people about its history, its content, its purpose, and how people must actually direct the agenda of the G20, and how G20 must arrive at decisions which are sensitive to the views of the people of the ground, it will become irrelevant. And that point was acknowledged yesterday, that there will never be enough communication. It has to be intensified.
You spoke earlier on about the proposals that are coming out, specifically from the youth, to ensure that this is not just something that happens when the G20 takes place, but it actually continues on a global scale throughout the course of the year. And that really speaks to issues of sustainability. And what are the mechanisms that are in place to ensure that whatever outcomes come out of this G20 summit, that they don't just remain rhetoric, that it's not just another talk shop, but that these outcomes translate into tangible benefits for ordinary South Africans, developments that they can see, feel, and experience in their day-to-day lives, specifically around economic empowerment and sustainable development as well.
On our part, as the Portfolio Committee, on Wednesday next week from 9 o'clock until late in the afternoon, we are sitting with Minister Lamola, who is the Minister of DERCO. And one of the things we are going to emphasize, one is that there has to be everyday communication across the board. What it means is that on a daily basis, some message must go out, not only to tell people about the papers that have been developed, so that the people can also feedback on what are their expectations. That's the first thing. The second thing that we are going to be communicating to the minister is a decision that has been taken yesterday, that post the G20, we would want them to report on a 6-monthly basis through Parliament to the people on how they are implementing the outcomes of the G20. Remember, the outcomes of the G20 are not detached from other outcomes that, like the Millennium Development Goals, like Agenda 2063 in the African continent, like the tools on how we implement. For instance, yesterday we said G20 must say how they are going to help Africa to implement the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, so that they can bring the resources, they can bring the knowledge, they can bring the capacity to work together with this developing economy in the African continent to implement our own perspective enshrined in the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. We are also saying issues of the environment has to be at the center of this industrialization through the agenda of the G20, because if you don't preserve the environment, there's going to be degradation, like all these calamities that are going all over the world. And what we are trying to develop through industrialization will then be destroyed because you did not preserve the environment.
Okay. Here's the last question just before we conclude then, right? So, and we've touched on it to a degree, but what mechanisms would you use or are in place, right, to ensure that post the G20 summit, the outcomes translate into something very tangible, very practical that we can feel?
The African Union has to make sure that every member state reports on a regular basis to the African Union on the extent to which they are implementing the outcome. Secondly, every parliament throughout the African continent, through the Pan-African Parliament, has to make sure that they report on a regular basis, quarterly, on the implementation and as far as oversight is concerned. Thirdly, business throughout the African continent, business doing trade all over the world, has to, on a regular basis, report to the substructures of the G20 through member states to say what progress are they making. Young people, like I said, are right. Some of the structures has to exist beyond G20. Those structures must sit down on a regular basis to discuss what progress we are making and use television, social media, newspapers, radio, interaction practical with people to make sure that we report on progress that we are making. But most importantly, it's important for G20 member states to say, we need to provide a platform for people to hold the state presidents who head the G20 states is concerned. And we hope that the Pan-African Parliament, working with the rest of the world, parliaments can work together and say, because we have got an instrument legally to hold executives accountable, how do we make sure that we become the voice of people through our parliaments, through committees, through members of parliament, so that the people can on an ongoing basis indeed hold the executive accountable by using their own parliament.
And we're going to have to leave it at that for this afternoon, but thank you very much for that update on the conversations that have been ongoing, making sure that everybody's voice is represented. That was the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee for International Relations and Corporations, Supra Mahumapelo. We thank you very much. It's exactly 4:34 Central African time. Thank you to the chair of the Portfolio Committee and to Ashraf Garda on SAFM. It's gone exactly 4.